I'm going over a poll released by Roanoke College that shows the state of Virginia, Vice President Harris leads over Donald Trump, but not by as much as you may think. In this poll that just came out a few days ago, Kamala Harris holds a 3-point lead over former President Donald Trump, 47% to 44%, in a head-to-head matchup in Virginia, and a similar lead of 45% to 42%, also 3% margin, when third-party candidates are included in that race. I'll also just briefly mention the Senate race as well, where Democratic incumbent Tim Kaine is leading Republican challenger Hung Kau, 49% to 38%. The poll was conducted by the Institute of Policy and Opinion Research at Roanoke College of 691 likely voters in Virginia between August 12th and August 16th, and the survey has a margin of error of 4.5%. So, there's a lot to break down here, and it's very, very interesting, and I'll just go through the rest of the poll as well and then give my thoughts at the end. Although only 2% of likely voters say they are undecided in the multi-candidate question, another 8% two-way to 13% six-way say they'll vote for someone other than Harris or Trump. RFK Jr. got 6%, Cornel West had 2%, Chase Oliver had 2%, Jill Stein had 0%. The previous poll in May showed Trump and President Joe Biden were tied. This is the first Roanoke College poll including Harris as the Democratic Party candidate. Nearly 4 in 5, 79% likely voters, are very certain of their choice, and another 18% are somewhat certain. More than half, 60%, are very enthusiastic about voting, 25% are somewhat enthusiastic, and the economy dominates among the important issues, being cited by 48% of respondents as the most important, abortion at 16%, immigration 15%, and foreign affairs 6%, crime 4%. Two-thirds, 68% of likely voters plan to vote on Election Day, while 31% say they will vote earlier. And this poll also continues with more details about the poll itself, but I'm just going to look at really quick some very important parts. Respondents gave Trump a 6-point lead, although the candidates were tied in the May poll among people with their vote plans prior to Biden's withdrawal. Some who had planned to vote for other candidates appear to have changed their minds, and 3% said they had not planned to vote in a Biden versus Trump matchup. Likely voters generally perceive Harris to be more liberal than Biden, 49%, with only 16% think she is more conservative. Half the respondents, 50%, think Trump's immediate response to the assassination attempt showed toughness. 44% see his attempt to gain votes. A large majority responds to not think a candidate's physical characteristics are important. 64% not at all. 18% not very important. About 1 in 5 think it's important that a candidate looks like them. 8% very important. 10% somewhat important. 51% in this poll thinks Trump is a threat to democracy. Slightly fewer, 47%, see the Democratic Party process of replacing Biden with Harris as such a threat. So a little bit more in favor of Trump, but still almost 50-50 in that regard. And I think that's pretty much all I really want to cover in this race, because the main point of this that I wanted to show is getting to this part here. As it comes to Virginia and how people think that Virginia is going, a small majority, 51%, think that Virginia is heading in the right direction, while 71% think the country is on the wrong track. So it's very, very narrow, but people in Virginia think Virginia is doing better at 51% than the country, which is 71% on the wrong track. The job approval rating for President Joe Biden in Virginia, according to this poll, is 35%. Congress is 20%. And Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican governor of Virginia, his job approval rating's at 59%, which is the highest in his term so far. Biden's 62% disapproval rating is also the highest in his time in office in Virginia. Now going to the candidates themselves, Trump has a 40% approval, 57% unfavorable in this. Biden has 37 favorable, 61% unfavorable. Harris is underwater at 43 favorable to 53 unfavorable. And then it gets into the vice presidential candidates and Supreme Court and such. So why did I go through all this? Why is this poll important? Well, for one thing certain, and it goes into more detail down here, is that this poll shows a very, very close race in Virginia, where Dr. Harry Wilson, the senior political analyst at IPR, goes into some detail about it. The switch from Biden to Harris made a difference in Virginia, but perhaps not as great as some may have thought. The news for Harris is certainly better than it was for Biden, but her 3-point lead is still within the margin of error. Both candidates are polling very well within their party, and there's a minuscule number of undecided voters. The party bases remain important as always. The number who say they will vote third party is declining, and those voters may well determine who wins Virginia. One big takeaway continues to be the chasm between the views of Democrats and Republicans. None of it is new, but it is remarkable that partisans interpret through different lenses. So what is this poll, when you think about it, really, what's the main takeaway here? And I'm going to go just show you really quickly in a minute why I think this is important. Again, 47-44, a 3-point race of Trump versus Harris. Why does this matter? Virginia has been a Democratic state really since 2008. Why does this matter? Well, in 2021, Glenn Youngkin was able to defeat Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. And since then, Youngkin and the Republicans have been very galvanized in Virginia in trying to win this state. So much so that a few months ago, when it was still Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, Donald Trump was actually leading in the Real Clear Politics polling average in the state of Virginia. Now, of course, as I mentioned, that is no longer the case as Joe Biden is not in the race anymore. It is now Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, as the poll mentioned, and Harris now has a 3-point lead. But it's very interesting nonetheless, because this is why. At the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton defeated Donald Trump by about 6 percentage points in the state of Virginia. And you look at 2020, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump by 10 points in Virginia. Harris now leading in this poll by 3 percentage points, at very least, is very, very interesting. Because on the average, she has a 4-point lead, but it shows at very least, this is a state that Harris is very much likely favored to win, and I do think she will win, but it's close. It's at least somewhat close. And it's kind of interesting to see this. This is the one toss-up state where we've seen when Harris entered the race and Biden dropped out. For instance, we saw in Minnesota and New Hampshire that a lot more Democratic support consolidated around Harris than previously was for Biden. And that kind of happened in Virginia as well, but as the poll showed, it went from being a tied race to Harris up 3, but it's not like Harris plus 6 or 7 in the instance of like Minnesota or New Hampshire. Virginia, at very least, seems to be somewhat in play here. Not one that I think the Trump campaign is going to put a lot of attention into. I think this will be more of leaving it up to Governor Glenn Youngkin and trying to see if he can pull off an upset in Virginia and give the state for Trump. But it's very interesting to see that this state may be closer than initially expected. So much so that it's only a 4% lead in the average, which, according to my personal rankings for electoral map politics and such, is under the lean column and not the likely column. So right now, I actually had Virginia in the likely Democratic column. I think I'm going to move it to the lean column right now. Minnesota and New Hampshire I'm not touching because they are still likely, as the recent polls have showed. Virginia being a 3-point race here and being the only recent poll that shows this race, at very least, shows that Virginia may be in play. And if Donald Trump had a spectacular night where he won every toss-up state, winning Virginia is definitely on the table. However, I don't think that Virginia, as I said, will go for Trump at the end of the day. I do think it'll still go for Harris. I think she has a 3-point lead. I think that is probably enough for her to win this state. But it's very interesting to see that Harris is not performing as well in Virginia as some of the other swing states or likely states that went from Biden to Harris when she joined the race that got more Democratic. Virginia did get more Democratic, but not in the margins that Biden or Clinton got in 2020 or 2016. So that's definitely one to keep an eye out for, that maybe if voter turnout is lower in Virginia, and a lot of Democrats assume that Virginia will go blue no matter what, and they may turn out not to vote, that may potentially lead to an election that's very closer in Virginia than expected, and maybe one where an upset for Trump is possible, similar to what happened with Youngkin in 2021. I'm not banking on it. I would not say that's the most likely outcome right now, but something interesting to watch nonetheless. That'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to give this video a like, click subscribe, share with your friends and family, and stay tuned as I'll be posting a video every day from now till Election Day. Thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.